Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. If you're a parent, a teacher, or a caregiver, you have almost certainly had those moments where you feel like you are literally talking to a brick wall. You ask your kid to do a super simple task, and half an hour later, they're just sitting on the floor building a Lego tower with, only one shoe on. Look, it happens to the absolutely best of us. But today we're putting a magnifying glass on this exact dynamic. We are going to focus heavily on how to actually support your child's cognitive growth rather than just endlessly trying to manage their behavior. By the end of this explainer, you're going to be equipped with a completely new lens for viewing your child's daily habits, and way more importantly, the scientific tools to help them succeed without all those exhausting daily arguments. So, we have to start with a really tough but absolutely essential question. Is your child ignoring you, or are they genuinely unable to keep up? It is incredibly frustrating when you give what feels like a basic instruction, like, say, packing a school bag before a deadline, only to find them totally distracted by a tiny toy or just staring off into space. It is so easy to let anger take over, right? To just jump to the conclusion that they're being lazy or defiant, or that they just don't respect your time. But what if it isn't behavioral? What if it's actually neurological?
Section 1. Understanding working memory.
To truly answer that question of what's happening neurologically, we have to look at executive functions. These are basically the cognitive management systems of the brain, running right from the frontal lobe, and they handle things like planning, attention control, and emotional regulation. But there is one specific executive function that is the absolute biggest culprit when kids struggle to follow your directions, and that is working memory. Think of working memory like the brain's temporary mental scratch pad. This isn't your long-term memory where you store childhood experiences, okay? It's the active workspace used to hold on to short-term information while you're right in the middle of doing a task. Imagine telling a child, go to your room, get your shoes, come back to the kitchen, and wait by the door. For an adult, sure, that's easy. But for a developing brain, holding 4 consecutive steps on that mental scratch pad causes an immediate overload. The information literally just falls off the board and is totally erased. The hard data behind this overload is actually kind of mind-blowing. Working memory capacity grows with age. A 6-year-old's brain can only hold about 2 to 3 items on their mental scratch pad at once. Tops. By age 10, it grows to maybe 3 to 4 items. It really isn't until they're teenagers, around 14, that they hit 5 or 6 items. So the absolutely crucial point here is this. When a young child forgets your multi-step instructions, it fundamentally reframes the issue from they won't do it to they physically cannot do it yet. Their brain just does not have the hardware capacity of an adult's. And you know what? This exact same scientific hardware limitation applies to time, too. Time perception is a developing executive skill. It is not an innate ability. We so often tell kids, you have 10 minutes to finish your breakfast. But to a 6-year-old, 10 minutes is just this completely invisible, abstract concept. They do not have the internal clock that adults do. Without concrete visual aids, a verbal deadline means absolutely nothing to them. Section 2. Defiance versus skill gap. So, how do we actually know what we're dealing with in the heat of the moment? It is critical as parents and caregivers that we accurately identify the root cause of the behavior. Because if we misdiagnose a legitimate skill gap as pure stubbornness, we completely miss the opportunity to support their cognitive growth. Defiance looks like direct refusal. The child uses language like, I don't want to, and you can clearly see conscious resistance in their body language. But a skill gap, that looks completely different. It looks like honest confusion. When you ask them why they didn't do something, they don't have a defiant excuse ready to go. They just say, I forgot, or I didn't realize how much time passed. It's an unintentional drifting away from the task.
Let's break down exactly what that skill gap looks like in daily life. First, you're going to notice inconsistent behavior. A child might successfully pack their bag on Tuesday, but completely fail on Wednesday. Then there's that honest confusion we just talked about. They really just don't know what happened. You'll also likely see a pattern across different environments, meaning they struggle with these multi-step tasks both at home and at school. Interestingly, if you provide them with visual support, they actually respond incredibly well and get right back on track. And finally, perhaps most importantly, rather than calm rebellion, they show visible frustration, anxiety, or even shame about constantly failing to meet your expectations. They really want to do well, they just don't know how.
Okay, here is something we all absolutely have to remember. Stress drains the very resource the child is short on. When we wrongly assume a child is acting out on purpose, our immediate reflex is to yell, to threaten punishment, or to sharply repeat the command. But raising your voice creates psychological stress. And biologically speaking, stress directly shrinks their already limited working memory. By yelling, you are actively making it harder for their brain to do the very thing you're asking them to do. Crazy, right?
Section 3. The visual board solution.
All right, so if verbal reminders and discipline don't work, what does? Well, we need to offload that cognitive weight, and the ultimate scientifically backed fix for this is a visual board. Why do these tools succeed so phenomenally well? Because a visual board takes the information out of the child's brain and puts it into the physical world. It literally offloads the memory externally. Because the instructions are physically there on the wall, it drastically reduces your need to verbally nagging them, which, let's be honest, immediately lowers the emotional temperature in the house for everyone. The board does the reminding. This builds the child's independence and, crucially, it takes the abstract concept of time and makes it visible.
What's super cool is just how adaptable this tool is. Whether you're at home or in the classroom, visual boards are absolute game changers. At home, you can use them to map out the morning rush or the evening bedtime routine to prevent those nightly battles. In the classroom, teachers use them to show the daily schedule or to outline the rules for transitioning between subjects, which is often a massive hurdle for kids dealing with executive dysfunction. You're basically giving them a roadmap they can always rely on.
Section 4. Steps for cognitive growth. Let's get into the exact steps so you can create these systems alongside your child and actively foster their brain development. Step 1, choose an age-appropriate format. If they're under 7, use simple pictures, like a little drawing of a toothbrush. If they're older, short text checklists work best. Step 2, break tasks into micro steps. Don't just write, get ready. Write, put on shirt, then put on socks. Step 3 is huge. Involve the child in the design. Let them pick the colors, the stickers, the symbols. This collaborative step is incredibly fun and gives them a real sense of ownership, which is fantastic for their cognitive growth. Step 4, use an interactive system. Think moving a magnet from a to-do column to a done column for a quick little dopamine hit. And step 5, add a visual timer, like a colorful sand glass, right next to the board so time becomes something they can actually watch slip by. Now, as you introduce these tools, keep a few essential tips in mind to ensure a really warm, supportive environment. First, avoid comparing children. The executive function maturity gap between kids of the exact same age can literally be 2 or 3 years. It is perfectly normal. Second, give them extra time without shaming them. Say, I know this takes time, just do the next step, instead of, why are you always so slow? Third, use immediate positive reinforcement after every micro step they complete. Celebrate those wins. And finally, track progress, not perfection. You are building lifelong cognitive skills here, and that is a marathon, totally not a sprint. I want to leave you with one really powerful question to internalize today. How can I shift my mindset from, why won't they just do it, to, how can I help them grow? Because when you realize that working memory and time perception are skills that need to be developed rather than just fixed personality traits, it completely changes your relationship with your child. You go from being an enforcer to a true partner in their cognitive growth. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Go ahead and start experimenting with those visual boards and just watch what happens when you give your child the right tools for their growing mind.